You may have seen something in a phylogeny that looks kind of like a comb. Well, that's a comb phylogeny. Creative name, I know. And that is the result of what is called an adaptive radiation. That's what we're going to be talking about in this lecture. Now, you may notice it's a little bit shorter of a lecture because we're going through some examples, but in class is when we really want to be doing some deeper dive into this. So if you want, please post up on the forum or join our Zoom session to kind of give your own opinion and work alongside us in defining what an adaptive radiation is. Give examples and really derive traits to why you have such a big phylogeny. All right, what is an adaptive radiation? Yeah, A. Okay. 1. Adaptive radiation. An adaptive radiation is when a lot of species survive and can get into new niches. Think, if you will, you got a species has some sort of novel trait, and there's a whole bunch of mutants that come off of it, and every one of those mutants is still working because it still has that derived trait that comes at the base of the phylogeny. That's such as the exploitation of a novel habitat. So perhaps you have some sort of a new usage, like photosynthesis. You're able to photosynthesize in a new manner that is going to give you an advantage in hot, dry climates. Chem photosynthesis. And this ability to photosynthesize in environments where other organisms can't opens up a new niche for you, and thus you can exploit that niche. And basically every one of the offspring that can exploit that niche is not going to have competition, and thus is going to have things pretty well made out for it. So it's kind of a usage of a new characteristic, basically some sort of a niche. And this is where I want you to come up with some characteristics that have allowed or will allow to the exploitation of new niches. And that's our discussion part of that. This is a video. Moving on. Some examples of great radiations. Perhaps one of the best ones is the plants coming to land. Now we have some plants here. These are the relatively unimpressive liverworts. And what they can do that previous plants couldn't do is, well, there were no previous plants. They were just some sort of algae. These plants have a cuticle. These plants can go on land. Now they can survive on land, not super far away from water. We're not talking in the middle of nowhere, but near streams. They're able to live away from water where they can be moist but not soaked. And that's different from the algae that were before them, because now they can inhabit the land. And there are no competition. There's no competition on land. They're the only things that can grow there, until, of course, bigger things came along. You think of the first trees. Now they could overgrow everything else, and there's no competition except for the same species. So this allowed plants to repeatedly radiate, and you see new species coming along, taking the place of old ones, and really a lot of speciation in a short amount of time. Here we have a fossil insect, and that fossil insect, well, it could fly. Now that's something new. There were organisms that could swim before. There were organisms that could stumble around and walk, but to have fold-outs of the cuticle that can now allow this organism to fly is a huge adaptation. Now it can get from point A to point B, split, it can just jump over canyons. Think about how well it can avoid predators when it can just take to the skies. Chump. And that's where you see a lot of these insects have the ability to fly, and it's this great adaptive radiation of organisms that can fly, flutter about. Jawed fish are another example. So you have, before jawed fish, organisms that were, they'd eat by kind of grinding things up, and then suddenly there's an organism that can chomp. And that organism that can chomp with these bony jaws has this great adaptation, and no one else has the ability to really swim about like fish do and bite things like fish do. So they're this great adaptation, much faster than other organisms, much larger than other organisms, fewer predators except for bigger fish with bigger jaws. And what you'll see is a lot of fossils coming up in a relatively short amount of time. Now I'm giving you this kind of an explanation for what adaptive radiations look like from our fossil standpoint. We look back through history and we notice all of these species we look back down and all these species kind of converge on a single population in which a certain trait has arrived. That is what happens with a radiation. A new trait comes along, and a lot of new species can come along. Now, what does this have to do with speciation? Well, think about how a lot of these organisms, if they have a small local adaptation, it's better for them to keep that local adaptation plus the big adaptation. and then they are their own species. So you can see speciation following an adaptive radiation event pretty easily. Let's look into some very specific examples, such as the Abominable Mystery. Now, the problem with the Abominable Mystery is, this is Darwin's thing, in his term, is that if you look back on plants, flowering plants didn't really exist. You didn't see many of them in the fossil record. Going through the Jurassic, there are not many flowering plants, if any. And then suddenly in the Cretaceous, bam, they're everywhere. Plants, flowering plants everywhere. Well, why did they appear so quickly? The hypothesis is, of course, the flowers. Now, there are other hypotheses out there, such as a more complex suite of chemicals in these plants that would keep them from herbivory. And that's a viable hypothesis. Perhaps these were things that just couldn't be eaten, so now they have no predators. It's not that they had no competitors. The gymnosperms were and still are their competitors. But this flowering, now one thing that allows them to do is to attract a species of bee or fly or beetle that will be specific to those flowers. So you see Amberella here, these very early flowers have very specific morphology, and Magnolia, another type of early flower, also has very specific morphology. Now, the same species is not going to cross-pollen between those. So what that means is every time a new flower shape arises, a new flower shape evolves, perhaps just through random mutation, it's going to be unique, and it's going to be uniquely pollinated by a species of fly, beetle, or bee eventually. And this is earlier as flies and beetles. So the ones that would stink a certain way would get the flies. The ones that would be larger for landing platforms, would be very tough, would be beetles. And this allows a plant to be reproductively isolated. When it's reproductively isolated, it can form a new species relatively quick because the flower itself is a reproductive isolating mechanism. It's a behavior. So that's part of this plant evolution. Now, it's possible that several of these hypotheses were correct. Perhaps it was the toxins in the leaves that rendered it unpalatable to most of the herbivores at the time, and the flowers allowed a greater rate of speciation. Perhaps it was the flowers would allow pollen to be dispersed over a higher amount of area, and thus would increase the variability, thus increasing the number of species. There are a couple different ways you can see this going out, but it all comes back to the flowers. So we also have epiphytes, and this is kind of a closer to a more recent adaptation, actually, and this is that certain traits of bromeliads. They're epiphytic, which means they live on top of other plants. They live on top of rocks. This is a habitat where you don't find cam photosynthesis. What's cam photosynthesis? Well, cam photosynthesis does well with low water and high temperature. Dr. Bodie, these live in the rainforest. They don't have low water. How much water do you get when you're living on a branch? Yeah, thought so. Something that's adaptive to be cam photosynthetic. Also, just to have the water tanks that they actually do. So this different morphology allows them to have it's a different lifestyle, and that's going to be these adaptations that allow them to colonize the tree branches at a better rate than other flowering plants. And their flowers are, of course, relatively unique too. All flowers are unique, right? But these ones are really, they got a special shape to them. You recognize a bromeliad. By having a new environment and by being superior competitors, you end up getting an adaptive radiation. And if you look at the phylogeny of the bromeliads, you'll see it kind of looks like a comb. You have a large number of species kind of arising very quickly from that one event where these species got to live as an epiphyte. And I might be thinking pineapples, and pineapples live on the ground, yes, but pineapples live in rocky environments, or, they have cam photosynthesis. Don't worry too much about it. You can adapt right back. Sea whales. Anyway, how do we know when when one of these adaptive radiations is reaching an end, though? When is it complete? And what we see with adaptive radiations is that eventually all the sub-niches of the new niche are going to be filled. So here we have anoles on the islands of Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. And what happens there is you have the number of new species goes up really quickly as they have colonized Cuba, Hispaniola, yada, yada, yada. As they've colonized this, they now have a new environment, and they have a new anole environment. They speciate rapidly. So some of them are going to live in the top of the tree, some in the middle of the tree, some of the long branches, some of the short branches, some of the holes, some of the rocks. They're going to live in different places, but eventually you can't go into a new place without an anole already existing there. So there's a limited number of species of anole that can exist. I mean, think about it. There's a limited number of cervine species in our area. There's deer, elk, moose, maybe? I don't know if there's moose. Geese? No. Limited number of niches available for servants. Limited number of niches available for anoles here. So once you've reached that, you actually kind of peter out there, and then those sub-niches are exploited, and you can't have any more species. So where on Earth do you think the most species will arise? An adaptive radiation have the most sub-niches. That's right, I hope. The jungle. So the closer to the equator is going to have more species. Why? Well, because closer to the equator has more species. And that's going to lead to more speciation there because there are more niches and sub-niches. Perhaps in an old species that only lives on one type of tree, there are more types of trees in the equator than there are, say, around here. Hashtag Douglas fir. So how can we relate these traits to the size of phylogeny? Let's look at dispersal. So dispersal is going to mean, is generally a term, having a greater dispersal ability tends to lead to having a larger phylogeny. Thus, we can say that having a greater dispersal ability can lead to adaptive radiation. Why? Well, when you disperse better, then you can get to new environments better. When you get to new environments better, you can get isolated populations better, allopatric populations. And these allopatric populations that are now isolated in habitat because they dispersed over there are now new species. They can accumulate mutations quickly because they get genetic drift as a small population in an isolated area. And that is going to lead to the accumulation of mutations that would make them a different species. Perhaps these mutations are going to be local adaptations, and when there are local adaptations, it is disadvantageous to mate with other similar species. Boom! Speciation. So dispersal, here is an example in toads. They got its ability to disperse. When they have a greater ability to disperse, you have this major period of global expansion. And from that major period of global expansion in the Oligocene, you see a vast number of toads. They're everywhere. And that allows them to speciate quicker. So there you have it. How do you want to be a successful species that's going to leave a lot of new species? Evolve to disperse. Colonize a new niche. Do them both, and like the rat, like the mouse, and like the human, you can conquer the world. Check the objectives here. Check out orchids and bromeliads. Take a look at those. I would cover bromeliads, but I really want you to look at orchids and their unique pollinating mechanisms. So give some time, check some examples, and write them into the forum.